Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln implored us to malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this, we are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong, secure, and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. We came together as Americans. We got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who were exposed to toxic materials. You know, most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. Today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first Black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I'd like to thank our great Vice President, Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders have given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Claremont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return, the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. You just have to keep faith, keep the faith. And remember who we are. We're the United States of America. And there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together, preserve our democracy. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel and a special episode of Night School. As you just heard, we operate in response to, we are appearing in response to the address given to the nation by Joseph Robinette Biden, the president of the United States of America. As you all know, on Sunday, President Biden issued a statement on Twitter where he basically declared to the nation that he was not going to return to the campaign trail. He said that he was not going to pursue re-election for the presidency. He gave a very clear and concise statement. He announced his victories over the last 3.5 years, and he thanked Kamala Harris for her partnership. That was it. Then, after maybe 20 minutes and about 10 million group chat texts and angry emails and Instagram posts from at least the Black community, he followed up with a very clear and unequivocal message saying that he supported Vice President Kamala Harris as the nominee for the Democratic Party in the 2024 presidential election. Since then, we've been waiting to see President Biden. We've been waiting to hear from President Biden. He promised us in his initial statement on Sunday that he would provide us with a more detailed and nuanced address in the future. Today was the future. Now, there were several reasons for the delay. You know, you would expect that a president would not announce his withdrawal from the election. I mean, it's the first time since 1968 that a sitting president did not pursue a second term. And in light of that, you would have thought that he would have given a public address from the beginning, but he didn't. And the reason that President Biden chose not to do that was because he was recovering in isolation from COVID. And while he certainly could have given the speech in isolation, I think they have technology and single cameras in the White House. What they did not have, what they could not offer, was a President Biden who looked strong, who looked clear-headed, who looked capable, who sounded lucid, who presented in an articulate manner for what would be not just maybe the most important speech of his political career, but maybe one of the most important and decisive political moments in modern American history. And so President Biden waited. Monday goes by, Tuesday goes by, and tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time, he offered his address to the nation. And in many ways, that address followed a similar pattern to what we saw from President Biden in the Twitter statement. He made an announcement, but this time he really focused on his accomplishments. He talked about having the greatest economy in the world. He talked about brokering peace in the Middle East. He talked about a a real decisive victory over big pharma. He talked about the racial employment gap and wealth gap and what he did to shrink it. Let me be clear. I am not saying that he did those things. I'm saying that he said he did those things. And he was making a case, as any good lawyer would do. Don't forget, President Biden is a lawyer by training. And after making the case for his extraordinary presidential record, President Biden made a very clear and unambiguous statement. He said, my record warrants a second term. Again, he said, my record warrants a second term. He made it very clear that he deserved a second term based on what he had done as president of the United States. But he said he decided not to pursue that reelection bid. And he said he wanted to make way for the new generation. He said he wanted to do what was best for the party. He said he wanted to do what was best for the nation. Now, implicit in that is a whole lot of stuff. He is saying that he's doing what's best for the party, but he's not saying what is the struggle inside of the party that makes him pull out the best. He's saying he's doing what's best for the nation, but he's not making it clear how his withdrawal from the race will benefit American democracy. He is saying that the next generation deserves a shot, but he's not saying why he cannot pursue another shot, another bite at the apple, so to speak. So tonight we were presented with lots of talking points, lots of peppy bromides about the nations and the possibilities of American democracy and our collective promise as a country. We were told a lot by Biden, but I think it's really important for us to also think about what we were not told. And what we're going to do tonight here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, and here on Night School, by the way, because this still is an episode of Night School. Normally Night School is 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday, where we unpack these topics. But tonight, a special edition of Night School at 8:30, or really in the immediate aftermath of President Biden's speech, we're going to unpack every dimension of President Biden's speech and talk about what it means to move forward. Specifically, we're going to talk about Biden's address. We're going to talk about Benjamin Netanyahu's statements as he approached Washington today. And beyond that, we are going to talk about the future of the Democratic Party and the future of this presidential race. It's quite interesting to think about what it might mean for a president to be replaced by his vice president, and for that vice president to, on the one hand, try to make a case that they are just as stable and consistent as the predecessor, at the same time saying that they are quite different and can inaugurate a shift in our politics. All of this is part of what Kamala Harris is going to have to do. It's a tightrope she's going to have to walk. It's a needle she's going to have to thread. And the question tonight that we're going to wrestle with on Night School, of course, is how? How does a vice presidential candidate do that? And what opportunities, what chance, what possibility, what promise did President Biden leave for Kamala Harris to make a successful fight or successful battle for the presidency? Anyway, here to help me make sense of all of that is a wide and diverse crew of voices. The first person who has entered the room, and I love Omar Bedar because, one, he's just smart and he's capable and he defies all the racial and ethnic stereotypes of our respective peoples. He is here 15 minutes early to help me break down all of this stuff. Omar, talk to me about the address that you just heard. When President Biden appears in front of the nation, what is your expectation, and did he meet those expectations?
Yeah, look, it's a downer of a moment, generally speaking, for him. So in a way, he met it, but the bar was not particularly high. It is him coming to terms with the fact that it's time to pass the torch, coming to terms with the fact that he can't continue moving forward with his candidacy. It's obvious from anybody who watched. Frankly, it was obvious for many people long before the debate, but certainly since the debate, that he's just not with it anymore. He's unable to speak for any extended period of time without fumbling 1,000 times and forgetting, losing his train of thought, and not keeping up with things. And in a way, I think that, frankly, what he's touting on the domestic front, again, it's a relative world, right? Like, does it go as far as I would like it to go? Obviously, it did not. I would have much preferred for somebody like Bernie Sanders to be running the country to push a much more progressive agenda. But nonetheless, given what we've seen so far of American presidents, I think Biden has had a decent domestic agenda. Did take on big pharma, did try, took on student debt, has a good environmental policy and approach. What really stood out for me, which will be unsurprising to you for me as a Palestinian, is this talk about us being in the face of a contrast between violence on one hand and decency on the other, and that it's just impossible to look at his policy towards Gaza in particular, and more broadly on Palestine and Israel, and think that can possibly resonate without the hypocrisy really flying into your face. We have, I don't know if you want to start diving into that at this point or not, but just it has been an absolutely horrific onslaught for nearly 10 months straight at this point in Gaza of every major human rights organization describing the relentless and indiscriminate bombing of civilians. We've seen doctors go there and come back and say they are targeting children with sniper fire, bullets to the head and to the chest, just numerous, endless piles of children who are being targeted. We're seeing humanitarian organizations saying there's not enough humanitarian aid being allowed in because of the Israeli siege. And the result is people are literally starving to death. And you see the level of displacement, you see the complete inability of Palestinians to have anything even resembling normal life at this point. And you've seen a massive protest movement here within the United States, people taking to college campuses, taking to the streets, demanding a change in American policy, not even to put a stop to Israel's onslaught, but to stop participating in it, to just say, as a fundamental American principle, if what we say about standing up for freedom and dignity and human rights and all of that is going to mean anything, then you cannot claim those values and continue arming and supplying effectively financing this genocidal onslaught that is unfolding in Gaza. And Joe Biden has not budged. He has expressed some concern. He's described Israel's bombing of Gaza as indiscriminate at one point. He withheld some weapons, but then a week later gave them all away and increased military funding. Just sort of, it felt like a charade. And ultimately, it is difficult to reconcile the idea of a decent person who doesn't believe that violence has any place in democracy, turning around and funding this kind of genocidal onslaught against civilians. That will never stop being jarring. And so for me, as much as I appreciate that Biden has done better than most on a domestic front, the contrast with the absolutely horrific foreign policy, to me, feels utterly unforgivable.
Much has been made of President Biden's debate performance against Donald Trump a few weeks ago as the kind of death knell of his political campaign. But for many of us, it was the primary season where people in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, young people, college students, progressive voters, Arab voters, Muslim voters, all decisively rejected Joe Biden's foreign policy record. And specifically, they demonstrated their deep and profound criticism and even outrage at President Biden's support of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza since October 7th. It seemed that when Biden was exiting the campaign, one of the first things that he said was, or one of the first things he said about him and to him was, there's no path to victory. You cannot win. The swing states, the vulnerable states, the states you won before, they're not on your side this time. We don't see you winning Michigan, for example.
Yeah.
To what extent did Israel's war on Gaza and the Biden administration's response to it ultimately undermine his ability to successfully win re-election.
Yeah. Look, there's no question in my mind that it played a very significant role. The diminishing polls before the extent of his cognitive decline had been apparent. The policy on Gaza had made a very, very significant shift. When you look at the public opinion polls done of just Arab Americans in a state like Michigan, I don't remember what the specific numbers are, but it's something like went from 80% support for Biden down to 16% or some such thing. Like, just, it was a ridiculously massive dip, specifically because of his policy towards Israel and Gaza and the fact that he's kind of embraced this genocidal onslaught and showed complete lack of sympathy towards Palestinians. Took everything that the Israeli government said at face value, even when it was documented to be false. There's no denying that atrocities were committed on October 7th, but the Israeli government went the extra step of embellishing the details of it to try to make it as inflammatory as possible in order to gain support for the following onslaught. And when the Israeli government would falsely claim that there were 40 beheaded babies, babies that were killed on October 7th were beheaded, Biden took on the initiative to come out and say, yeah, I saw the pictures, that did happen, when it did not happen. When there was another instance of the Israeli government claiming that the headquarters of Hamas is underneath Gaza's largest hospital, again, absolutely no evidence, effectively debunked afterwards. Biden said, yes, our intelligence confirms it. We believe the Israelis when they say it. And just left and right covered for Israeli lies in a way effectively was completely complicit in what Israel was carrying out, in addition to financing it relentlessly. And when people brought up the issue of Palestinian deaths, he would say, oh, well, I'm not sure you can really trust Palestinians when it comes to those numbers. At every turn, he has just been completely out of touch with reality and fundamentally lacking in decency towards Palestinians. It's as if he did not really see them as fully human beings. And that was a clear dip. And there's a second part, which for me is speculative. I don't know this for a fact, but it feels as if his inability to deal with the crisis in Gaza contributed to his decline. From just me watching it, when you look at how he was doing, it feels that the amount of decline that we've seen since October to now has just been really precipitous. It's just moved very, very quickly. It's like every couple of weeks that you see him, he seems to be even less coherent. And so you wonder whether he has not been able to deal with the stress of the situation. Now, in a way, had he not had this mental decline, had he still been sharp, it would have been clear that his declining numbers are exclusively the result of his policy, and that may have potentially been a stronger incentive for Democrats to change course, to stop,
or an incentive for him to change his policy direction, right? Like, he could have said, hey, as he did for, like, I swear to God, it felt like 24 hours a few months ago when he said no more money's going to Israel if they're going to have a military invasion into Rafah.
Yeah.
And then within a week, there was money and weapons being targeted for Israel again. So, or being earmarked for Israel again. So I say that to say, Biden certainly, even at his sharpest, was vulnerable in his own party for his Israel-Palestine positions. But he also had an opportunity to change directions, and there was a kind of stubbornness there that I think is informed quite, in some ways, maybe wisely by history, which is to say, every president that stood with Israel is, no president has lost an election by standing with Israel. But it seemed like this might be the first time for that. I want to bring in our other guests here. First, let me bring in Rebecca Azor. She is a brilliant political analyst and somebody who is a dear friend to the Night School program. Rebecca, I want to take a step back for a moment. You watched President Biden's address. What did you make of both his message and his the appearance of his message, the form and the content?
Okay, so I watched it and I wanted to see what the mood was going to be. If he was going to be on what people were calling how he was being arrogant, if we're going to see that from his arrogancy, from him not wanting to step down and still continue another term, even though people were saying he's clearly not capable. And in his speech, it was more so like, damn, I got to do this. Like, it's like he didn't want to let go, but saying, because, and as he said in his speech, this is for the unity of the party. And if I don't step down, it will be divided. So this is the only reason why I'm really doing it. Also, basically he's doing it for the people, for the love of America. It's not about him, but it's about the American people, the democracy. And so in his voice, in what I saw, he looked sad to do this. It's almost like he had that last hurrah moment. Give him a little bit more time. I know it's reported that he spoke with Chuck Schumer, who said he needed to step down. And he said, give me a week. You can see that where he still wants that leadership position. But what I saw in him is just somebody who didn't want to give that speech, heartbreakingly gave it. And a lot of what he addressed, he missed some things, but this is where I believe Kamala is going to have to pick up. But that's just what I seen for me in his speech.
Rebecca, in many ways, this was a legacy speech.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden wasn't just updating us on what was going on in the race. He was entering his presidential record into the annals of history. He was making a case very clearly that I had a great record. It warranted a second term, but I'm stepping back. In the context of legacy building, how did you think that his address played to the public?
He made sure to hit a couple points because he's like, okay, now this will be legacy. I did this for the country. Don't you forget it. But listen to when I was president or during this term, I'm going to make sure I go out with the bang. But I want you guys to be reminded what I did for Black people, how I made sure I brought on Katunji, what I've done for minorities. When he mentioned, as you guys were just speaking about Gaza, he talked about hostages, child. And it was that moment. I'm like, oh, that's gonna sting a little bit. We're gonna hear that for the rest of the night because you blatantly, stood 10 toes down again for your position with Israel and not with Palestine and not a ceasefire. Leaving out with the bang, I would have loved to hear more of that, but he's legacy building for America and the American people. So just toting what he's done, which, he should, he made sure to hit those points that are going to, I guess, matter for him. And he has done those things that he mentioned, but he wanted to make sure that those, don't forget it. Don't forget that I've done these things. I brought jobs. I cleaned up what the last administration, Donald Trump, did. This is what the Biden administration did. This is what I did while I was here and while I was president. And he don't want y'all to forget it. You're on mute.
Mark, you muted.
Sorry, y'all. I muted. I had a baby crying in the back for a second, so I was on mute.
That's
I think he's asleep now. Everybody joining us now, I want to add something to the conversation, is Raynard Jackson. He's a Republican political consultant. He's a radio host based in Washington, D.C., and he has worked in the presidential campaigns of George H.W. Bush as well as George W. Bush. Raynard, thank you for joining me. You watched this speech, which was President Biden's first address since ending his 2024 re-election bid. What did you make of it?
Well, before we get started, Mark, thank you for having me on your show. Number one. Number two, Mark, I don't think I've ever said this to you publicly. You got one of the smartest brains I've ever seen in this country. I don't agree with many things you say, but I think just as far as sheer intelligence, you at an apex order. And I just enjoyed talking with you, even though we disagree a lot. But just having an intelligent conversation to me is worth its weight in gold. So now that I said that, now I got to smack you around a little bit. So
go ahead.
No, I mean that.
I didn't say that yet. What you think about Biden, man? What did you make of his address?
I thought it was horrible stylistically and substantively. For example, one of the things that hit me like a ton of bricks when he said America under his administration is not involved in one war. I'm like, why do they call it the Russia-Ukraine war then, which is a proxy war for U.S. going against Russia? Because we do have military boots on the ground in Ukraine right now and have had for months. So for him to make a statement like that was just so easily debunked, I was just dumbfounded at that. And I get it that Trump is the boogeyman, but you've been president during their 4 years. At what point do you say everything that's going on now is under my watch? Therefore, the good, the bad, the ugly, it is my responsibility.
What was some of the
Trump.
What was some of the what did you hear him blame Trump for? I didn't hear much Trump blame, but maybe I missed it. I heard
illegal immigration, open borders. The previous administration left me with this problem, and I fixed the problem.
Yeah,
like, really?
Yeah, I think that's different than saying, something's wrong and it's not my fault, it's Trump's fault. He's saying something was wrong and I fixed it. He's touting his presidential record, much in the way that Trump would say, I fixed the economy. Trump would say, I got us out of wars. Trump would say, I made great deals. I got us out of that horrible Iran deal. Whatever. I'm not saying I agree with these positions, but every president sort of says, I got presented with this and I fixed it.
Okay, if he fixed it, then why is Chicago, New York, Baltimore, St. Louis finding unfounded money to house illegals, but we have American citizens who are residents of Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, DC. They didn't have money for them, but all of a sudden, Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis from Texas and Florida, respectively, start shipping illegals from their states to these sanctuary cities. All of a sudden, we found untold money to take care of them, but American citizens and veterans sleeping under bridges, we don't have money for them. I'm confused.
Omar, what do you make of that take? That Biden articulated an agenda that he actually didn't fulfill, that he has made claims that he that don't merit him patting himself on the back for. What do you say?
Yeah, look, on the immigration thing in particular, obviously opinion polls show that this cuts in favor of Republicans, that there is a sense among the American population in general that it's important to protect the border, and the sense that there's too many people coming over and we don't know who they are. It's just a fact, though, that a lot of this is based on very successful Republican fear-mongering. Immigrants do not commit crimes at a higher rate than than the people who are already in the country. And yet, every time a crime is committed by an immigrant, you see Republicans making a huge deal out of it, pulling it out as an anecdote and blaming people for having inadequate border policies and what have you. And at the end of the day, people like this country was founded, literally, the idea, of course, it never got fulfilled. It took a while for us to live up to the ideals that were professed. But the idea is that this is a country where persecuted people can come from anywhere in the world and come here no matter who they are and be free. And it's understandable that you would want that to happen in a more orderly fashion. But when people arrive at your border and they're seeking asylum, you can't just turn them away. There is a responsibility.
Yes, you can.
There's
the international convention that said if you are seeking asylum, you must not consider, not think about, you must apply for asylum at the first country that's a participant in the protocol, which in this case will be Mexico.
We know that in practice things are more complicated than that.
It's not. It's the law.
People are trying to look for a better future for their families. Sometimes people come here, have children in the United States, even though the parents are here as undocumented immigrants. And these children know, or people rather who bring their children as very, very young children to cross the border as undocumented. And these kids grow up knowing no other home except the United States. And that's where the issue of the DREAM Act, for example, comes up. And to me, that's a fundamental decency and common sense that a child who effectively spent their entire life in the United States, but who is technically not a citizen, you can't just ship them back to some other country and say deport them all no matter what, because you're sending them to a country that does not feel like home. They don't speak the language of the country that their parents brought them from. And this is effectively their home. And as long as they are a productive member of society, there is absolutely no justification for me from a basic human decency angle to say just ship everybody away. Should we have a more orderly system in which people come through the country and take border security more seriously and be more aware? Like, certainly, I don't want to dismiss all of these concerns, but at the same time, the Trumpian proposition that is just constantly fear-mongering about who's coming across the border and who they might be and who they are. And at some point he was complaining about, remember the immigrant caravan that was heading towards the border, saying there are unknown Middle Easterners in it. It's just him talking out of his behind and making things up.
Did you hear the briefing the FBI director gave this morning?
Because he knows that this is the kind of rhetoric that gets people riled up and concerned, and it feeds into a sentiment of people who are effectively xenophobic. There really is no other way to put it. This idea that the people on the outside are all a threat, and we somehow have it better.
Let me bring Rebecca back. And Rebecca,
just one last point I just want to make real quick, and I'll make some room. Not forgetting the fact that within this country, you have people killing each other by the tens of thousands. We have gun violence that is out of control. Sexual violence is out of control. You've got ridiculous statistics. And this constant pointing at the anecdotes of immigrants who commit crime, I think, is really missing the point when we have so many problems to fix, and this does not really rank all that high on that list.
Rebecca, there are two different stances on immigration, particularly border policy, that are being articulated in 2016, in 2020, and now in 2024. I'm not sure that either party has done much more than punt on immigration when the screws are really put to them. But they clearly articulate very different agendas. Trump's build a wall movement, even if you think it was an empty promise, was a compelling one and a persuasive one to voters in 2020 or in 2016, excuse me. He won the presidency on it. Biden, offered a more humane policy response to Donald Trump's immigration, and particularly talking about southern border policy in particular, as well as a response to the so-called Muslim ban and things like that. In each of those cases, I'm not defending Biden here at all, but I'm saying the Biden administration offered one perspective. The Trump administration offered a completely different one. As we stand in 2024, in the wake of a Harris campaign and a Harris nomination and candidacy, what do you think that voters are looking for? What are voters committed to seeing and producing through the presidential election in terms of border policy? What do they want?
I'm not the fear mongering. So I know that it was different, right? How it was articulated with the Trump administration and with, the Biden administration. But I do recall there were points where I don't think Joe Biden took it on as strongly as he could have, more protectively, more protection for the immigrant or surrounding the immigrant conversation, because I've heard him say more than once, and comparing it to basically immigrants can be criminals and them coming over here can be problematic. The fear mongering, I've heard it on both sides. I've seen also that the Biden, I remember Kamala Harris telling the people don't come, and I understand that it was for the protection of America, but it was also just giving like, hey, this still gives the same energy as Trump administration. The Title 42 being reused and repurposed for Ukrainians, but same issues going on in Haiti, and they still weren't given that same opportunity. And under the guise of COVID, right? We saw a lot of different things happening, but I hope that, because this is actually a huge issue, it's not something to brush under the rug, but it's more so like, hey, me being a product of migrants, I understand what I would like for America or our president or our leaders, how they should have these conversations, because I know how they look at my parents, right? My parents are Haitian migrants, and I know how the system looks at Black migrants. I know how the system looks at Middle Eastern folks or people who aren't even Middle Eastern. They just look at them as if they're terrorists. This is what America, that's how they associate people who are migrants, or for how they look or whatever the case may be. And I've seen that the darker your skin color as a migrant, the more that you'll be attached with some criminal conversation or something that isn't right. But we see that when you're like a white migrant, the administrations push that and then say that, hey, look what we've done for immigrants. But I will say they can do a better job, especially with Kamala herself having parents who are migrants. I would love to see that conversation shift and what that would look like, see more policy surrounding that. Just want to see how that would look outside of her, even though, because it's going to be, I mean, I know we want to see it a whole total difference, but this is going to be a Biden administration repurposed. It's going to be a little bit more fluff, just run by somebody else.
Raynard, let me ask you a question. A couple of years ago, Kamala Harris got sharply criticized by many of us on the left when she made an address to migrant communities saying, don't come. For many people, she was beginning to present herself as the kind of muscle, the enforcer of Biden's immigration policies, which were shockingly more aggressive and right-wing than the Democratic Party would like. Not to say that it was Trump policy, but it was aggressive policy. It wasn't warm and welcoming. It wasn't give me your tired, give me your poor. It definitely wasn't an Ellis Island speech. So does Kamala Harris for you represent any departure from the Biden administration in terms of immigration policy or the possibilities of a new immigration vision?
No, not at all. Matter of fact, she's going to be more extreme than Biden, in my view, simply because Biden, if you know, I've known Joe Biden for 25, 30 years. The real Joe Biden, he's more of a centrist. I mean, he'll never be as conservative enough for me, but the Joe Biden as president is unrecognizable to me. I mean, I remember many a days walking with him through the Senate tunnels and just having beautiful conversations with him. And to look at the way he's governing now as president, it's like, where the heck did all those conversations go 15, 20 years ago? And here's my point, Mark. We can disagree philosophically, but what I can't get beyond, folks on the liberal side, is the number one rule of politics, the number one rule, at least in my family growing up black in the hood of St. Louis, you take care of your family first. Then if you have an extra morsel of bread to feed your neighbor or your kid's friend down the block, you help them out. But what I see now is like being an American citizen is almost like a liability. I mean, you get nothing. Well, I mean, for example, I'm in New York all the time. I stay in Times Square. Now, I can well afford to stay in a $500 a night hotel. Don't do it. But when I see most of the Manhattan hotels,
money. I mean, that's money, honey.
Well, I'm trying to keep it too. But my point is, and Mark, and I think I would like to think even you would see my point on this, is not that I'm cold and callous and lacking compassion, but how can I see a fellow citizen who don't have an apartment to live in New York City, Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, but yet I see little kids in New York getting kicked out of baseball fields so they can put up a outdoor shelter for illegals, and now my kid have nowhere to play baseball during the summertime. That's happening all over the country.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Jump in, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit curious whenever I hear Republicans talk about this a little bit, because Republicans are against social programs for Americans almost always, right? When you talk about helping with student debt or with better healthcare or with all kinds of social programs, we don't have money for it. No, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But then the second it becomes about any kind of minimal services to help people who are crossing the border survive in this country, it suddenly becomes we should take care of our own. Why can't we take care of our own without even talking about that part of it? You have a military budget that is through the roof, that keeps expanding at a rate that the Pentagon does not want the expansion. Whenever the Pentagon says we want this much money, and then Congress falls over each other, demanding an even higher military budget that we actually don't need and don't put to good use. And in the meantime, we're trying to blame minimal social services for immigrants or what have you, and saying this is the reason why we're not taking care of our own. Why not tackle this issue where it should be tackled, which is where we're actually wasting money and money that is not helping anyone, spending it on planes that don't work.
Let me answer that.
Sure.
Okay, you will agree with me that our number one priority must and has to be taking care of American citizens. Do we agree on that point there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, without military spending, and I agree with you, the Pentagon is way, way too big. I think we can be just as effective militarily, especially with all the technology. But at the same time, I understand the nexus between military spending and us being able to do this interview that we're doing, because the internet came from DARPA, which is funded by DOD. And so without all this military spending, we wouldn't have all this technology, all the satellites flying around the sky. So one is a derivative of the other. Now, I'm willing to entertain a conversation with people with your viewpoint about, can we better utilize the money spent in DOD? And I say, absolutely, we can.
On that note, it's money that they can't account for. I mean, the Pentagon can't pass an audit, and most of this money goes into the pockets of private military contractors. So you've got,
I agree.
It's an entire system that is deeply broken, and that's where most of the money, like just the amount of money that is being spent there compared to what is being spent on social services for migrants and refugees, it's not even close. And so it just seems
well, I agree. But again, my default position is, and it's always going to be, again, it's not that I'm lacking compassion, but I mean, I'm guys, I just have a hard time reconciling walking down the streets here in DC and seeing an American citizen with need, and the government, the politicians on a local level saying, we don't have the budget for American citizens, but somehow they find money out the blue to take care of illegal. That's my only point of contention. Once we take care of our fellow citizens, I'm willing to open up my heart to other folks.
So illegal is crazy. Are we calling them illegal? But migrants, like I rather, the term illegals, it just that this has this negativity with that.
But no, that's codified in law. That's actually what the statute says, that if you're not here lawfully, you are illegally in the U.S. That is actually part of the statute. We're not legal term.
Right, but we're not legally bound to use dehumanizing language. We're not legally bound to refer to people by their legal designation.
It's okay.
All kinds of things other than what the law says we are. Right? We call each other human beings. We call each other friends. We call each other documented. We call each other patriots. We call each other citizens. We call each other all kinds of things. And in this case, discourse of the illegal becomes a way to dehumanize people, and also to stigmatize very particular people, very particular migrants and immigrants to the country, and not others. That said, I want to pivot because, and by the way, everybody, if you're tuning in now, you're watching Night School, and this is a growing global classroom. So a lot of y'all are here for the first time. Hit the subscribe button if you are here for the first time. Hit the like button if you're here for the first, second, or fourth time. By the way, as we talk about Biden's address and all these other issues, let us know where you're watching and listening and engaging from. Drop in your name, drop in your city, drop in your state, drop in your country in the chat. Again, it's a global classroom, so you got friends and classmates from all over the world. At the same time, I want to make sure that you follow us on Instagram. So when you hit IG, go to Night School MLH and talk to us. If you're watching this on Twitter, it's fun and it's cool, but you can head over to YouTube and you can join the actual conversation. You can actually drop in comments. You can hit the like, you can hit the subscribe, and you can be in conversation with a comment section. I'm telling you right now, that is crazy. You don't want to miss that. Now, we've been talking at the onset about President Biden's, I don't want to call it a farewell address, but it was certainly his first public appearance since dropping out of the race, the presidential race, on Sunday via Twitter. So this was kind of his formal, like, I broke up with y'all by text. Now I'm going to meet you in person and say, yo, it's not you, it's me. I got to move on, right? The second part of his speech, maybe the third part, it's like, I did a great job. I'm leaving. We're going to be okay. Part of his "we're going to be okay" message was saying that Kamala Harris is the right person to move us forward. Rebecca, I want to start with you, and then I'm going to go to Raynar. What do you make of the Harris presidential campaign? What do you make of the Harris candidacy?
Yeah, so it's so interesting because I feel like
You can't see her, y'all.
yeah, I know. I feel like it's okay. There we go. 'Cause I'm like, okay. No, but it's so interesting because I feel like in the Harris, I am not somebody who, I'm gonna be honest, 100. I'm on. I was never like a stan for Kamala Harris, but at the same time, there is no time. Like there is no time for me to be like, you know what? Let me start looking at the Green Party. I didn't look at this candidate. We don't have that time right now. This is what we have. So right now, I think this is the perfect time for us to band together to get her in a seat. In my opinion, because we were just complaining about him being too old, him being Joe Biden, being too old, not being able to withstand another 4 years, not being able to lead us correctly, not being cognitively aware of anything, not being able to finish his sentences or speak properly to people, remember things. We were going in. So he was like, here you go. Like he's going to be some Biden left in here. And he gave us Kamala Harris. This is the thing. This is what we have. We can, like all the complaints that we have. Okay. She's younger. She's fresh. She's a woman. I will say, I know how America is, though. America is anti-woman. America is anti-Black. America's anti anything other. And she is all those things. Migrant. She's a product of migrants. So they're going to throw so much of those things her way, our way. And for people who have had and I said this earlier, anybody like me who has had something to say, let's get together, put that lady in the office, because this is our only opportunity. This is probably our only chance right now. So we can get her in there, and then we can hold her accountable when she's in seat and start, doing some kind of work to get somebody else in within the next 4 years. But if we don't have her, well, who else?
So Rebecca, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that any investment you have in the Harris campaign is solely tied to the fact that she's not Donald Trump. You're not inspired by her campaign. You've never been motivated by her as a figure. I'm not saying you don't like her, but you seem almost indifferent to her. But you're like, look, she's the best shot at Trump not being president. Is that a fair assessment of how
that is? But it's not the only thing. I will say, in this time, I ain't gonna lie, I've been very inspired now, like right now, not necessarily with her, but how Black women are banding together to have support groups for what's going to be saying, because we're going to have a lot of conversations that are going to be surrounding our value as Black women or women of a minority group. There's going to be a lot of conversation that is going to be trying to pick apart our value as women. We already know people with mics, we know how podcasters can get, but also just the immediate reaction to Black women getting together, 44,000 women getting together on a call to raise just $1 million to make sure that she has a start, and then Black men getting right behind that. And then just seeing how everybody got together was such a beautiful thing. Now we can't focus on just that though. Like it can't be just that. It's beautiful. I wish that we can be in this beautiful space and be like, wow, look what the Black people are to know. We got work to do. So this ain't the only that. So I think I'm more so on, there's people that are like me who are going to be like, I just still don't want to vote for her. I just am not going to do it. But we have to talk to those people and to let them know, hey, this is really important, not only just because of that, but your future, our future, sure. America's future. So.
Raina, I know I promised you to go next, but I want to ask one other question really quick about this, because before you all jumped on, we were talking about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and some of these contested states where a significant slice of the people said, we're not committed to Biden yet. Does Kamala Harris start from a place of similar doubt among those voting populations? I talk to people in Dearborn all the time. I talk to people in Detroit all the time. I talk to people in Ann Arbor all the time. Those are significant places where people said, until you do something different in Gaza, you don't have our vote. We're not saying no, we're saying not yet. Does Kamala Harris enter the race with a not yet, or does she start with the benefit of the doubt? Unmute yourself there, brother.
Everybody has to do it once during a podcast, right? The meeting. Look, there's a level of uncertainty with Kamala Harris. There is an understanding that her hands are tied, that ultimately she is a part of this current administration. She can't chart a completely different foreign policy while President Biden is still in office. That's not how it works. You have to present some level of loyalty. And the existing policy of President Biden has been incredibly disappointing, is a small way to put it, for how the community feels about this onslaught in Gaza. And in a way, there is a small promising sign in the fact that when Kamala Harris speaks about Gaza, she speaks with a greater level of empathy towards Palestinians. You can tell she struggles with it more than Biden does. Biden just does the default, Israel's defending itself, we support Israel. Like, that's just what he's used to having to go
himself
to.
a Zionist. I mean, he didn't just struggle to defend Palestinian rights. He says, I'm a Zionist. And of course, he tries to smuggle in some bizarre, obfuscated definition of Zionism that ignores the political violence inherent in the project. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, Biden's pretty hardcore here.
Yeah, and outrageously says things like in a recent interview, I've done more for Palestinians than anybody else. He's literally overseeing the largest onslaught of Palestinian civilians that we had ever seen in history. And it's just speaks to a level of, again, just not seeing Palestinians as human in a way that Kamala Harris is different. When she talks about this issue, she's not charting a different policy from Biden, unfortunately, but she speaks about it with empathy towards Palestinians that you can feel. She understands the magnitude of the atrocities being committed. And so when she's asked about it, you can tell she's trying to figure out how to speak about this in a nuanced way that acknowledges the incredible pain and suffering and injustice that Palestinians are enduring. But the question is that only politically motivated? Is it just reading the room and knowing where young voters are in the US right now and feeling like you have to speak that way? Or is this a sign for a potential shift in a Harris administration on policy? It's going to require something, I think, a little bit more in order for the community to really come around and feel good about it, because I can tell you they don't want the Trump presidency. But and just a last point on this, for me personally, I've always been a harm reduction voter. I've always been a lesser of two evils. For me, it was not a difficult choice between Biden and Trump. I wasn't a fan of Biden, but I felt it was really important to get Trump out of office for the sake of harm reduction. And I'm being tested in this election is that this is the first time where, even though I do see Trump as being worse than Biden, the scale of the violence, people that I personally know have been killed in Gaza, the family members of people who I consider to be dear friends have also been killed. And viscerally, it is difficult to bring yourself to vote to someone who's responsible for arming and funding this genocidal onslaught that we're witnessing. And so it's, I think Kamala Harris is going to need to signal in a stronger way about a different path forward to really bring people around who might be able to turn out for her in a strong way.
Right now, Joe Biden has been consistent in his stance on Israel and Palestine. That's not good. That's not bad in and of itself. It's just an analysis of its consistency. There's a way that the Harris administration has an opportunity to change direction, but so does the Trump administration. If Donald Trump had been president since October 7th, what would be different in terms of the United States' position on the war on Gaza?
Well, I think it would have been a lot shorter war, in the sense that, let's face it, most Republican presidents, almost without exception, they're going to skew heavily towards pro-Israel, just across the board. And
president, Democrat and Republican.
Well, Biden has kind of moderated that somewhat on the Democratic side, because Obama and Bill Clinton, they were indistinguishable between a Republican president vis-a-vis Israel.
Right.
At least Biden has tried to put a little daylight there. Now, we could argue about whether it's been successful or not, but I think Trump gets a bad rap. And I'm a big supporter of Trump, and I do a lot of work overseas, publicly and privately. And I'm gonna tell you something. I don't know if it was Roosevelt or someone back in the day said it's better to be feared than to be loved. Trump has world leaders afraid of him, that he will take an adversarial line against them and their country's interests. And so a lot of times, these foreign leaders, when Trump was in the White House, they did things for Trump when he was president they wouldn't do for any other American president, because they were terrified of Trump. So I think in foreign policy, fear is good.
Well, it doesn't seem that Netanyahu was afraid of Trump or any U.S. president. It seems that in many ways Israel sees itself as the kind of tail wagging the dog. I say that partly given the fact that today, y'all, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel hit the streets of D.C.
I missed that.
Yeah, man, he arrived in D.C. as promised to speak to a joint session of.
Okay,
Congress.
no, I saw that. I thought after the speech, maybe he went into a local community.
Oh no, I'm being a little playful when I say he hit the streets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He wasn't listening to go-go music or
Right.
Trying to
Now, let me talk about his speech for a second before Congress. I watched the whole thing.
What'd you think?
And I'm not as up to date as you and Omar, maybe Rachel are on Israeli policy vis-a-vis Palestine. I know enough to be dangerous. I have friends in both camps. But here's the thing that I took away from it, just from a political and an optical perspective. When Netanyahu started introducing the soldiers who were sitting in the gallery as his guests, I really focused in when he introduced the Ethiopian soldier that's an Israeli citizen, and how when he woke up on October 7th, he didn't have a car. He ran 7 miles to the border with his arm in hand and went to the front line. Again, regardless of what you think about the conflict, that I thought that was brilliant. It was powerful. And for him to have those soldiers that span the racial gap sitting up as his guest, I thought that was powerful. It was very, very powerful.
It is definitely a powerful act of political dishonesty. In theater.
That's what a speech like that's supposed to do, because they're trying to persuade people like me.
Right. And so, for those that didn't catch the speech, a big part of what Prime Minister Netanyahu did, and to me, this was a speech designed to, just like in the era of Obama, to kind of show up the president, to wield power and to bypass the American political order, the executive political order, and go directly to both the American people and to the Congress. He said that he's going to achieve total victory. He declared the desire and a commitment to achieving total victory against Hamas. And he said he denounced the opponents of the war in Gaza who live in America, all of us who are challenging this war in Gaza, as quote unquote idiots.
I heard
idiots.
Do you mind if I just weigh in on this particular point?
Yeah, please.
It was an incredible sight for me, by the way. Obviously, the fact that he was invited in the first place is just incredibly distasteful and disgusting in the middle of everything that is happening. He is wanted by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on war crimes. Israel is right now at the ICJ for investigating the crime of genocide. And you have, again, the testimonies of what's unfolding on the ground from human rights organizations, from the soldiers, the videos that Israeli soldiers themselves are posting of what they're doing in Gaza is absolutely horrific. And to extend them that invitation in the first place, I thought was outrageous. But you add on top of that precisely that point that you just made, that Netanyahu is attacking American college students. He's a foreign leader accused of war crimes. From my perspective, it's a done deal. He is a war criminal. That's the only way to describe him. A foreign war criminal is attacking American college students who are the conscience of this country, who are the ones standing up and saying war crimes are not okay, the U.S. should not participate in them. Netanyahu attacks them, and American lawmakers stand up and applaud a foreign war criminal who is attacking American students. I thought the optics of that are absolutely awful and disgusting. It might appeal to a narrow set of people who are really hardcore on this, but beyond that, it really just highlights how deeply broken American politics are. It does not happen that you invite a foreign leader to attack Americans and people applaud. And somehow with Israel, it's always the exception. And it's partly because Republicans see this as a wedge issue to squeeze Democrats. They think they can peel off, American Jews are overwhelmingly liberal and progressive and they vote Democrat. And they think by proving that they're more pro-Israel, they can peel some of that off. But if you're not hardcore on this issue, this really does stand out to you as something that is it's just grotesque, and I don't know how anybody can miss it, frankly.
That I was actually wondering about that and sort of how that will play out in the minds of voters. Omar, does Kamala Harris's previous statements, previous record on this issue, make you more or less optimistic that we'll see a more favorable policy direction from a Harris presidency? I'll tell you from my perspective, I see no indication that anything will be different. And I say that partly based on just a clear-headed analysis of American presidents since the 70s. There's been no US president that has offered any profound challenge to the Israeli apartheid state. George H.W. Bush spoke out against settlements. President Obama abstained from a vote, a UN Security Council vote. Not exactly profiles in courage here. So I have no reason to believe that Harris, who has given the AIPAC speeches, who has echoed the talking points, who has offered, these sort of romantic, warm and fuzzy, feel-good narratives about the formation of Israel, and against the backdrop of that, when she was running for Senate,
for more than 9 months, Israel's soldiers have shown boundless courage.
It sounds like she might agree with this.
With us today,
we've got speech going. Yep. It's one of those things where, just to the point that Reynard was just making a second ago about the fact that Republicans tend to skew this way, that is relatively more recent. If anything, frankly, historically, it's been the other way around, of sort of Democrats being the ones who are much closer to AIPAC and therefore much more supportive of Israel. You've had an example of Ronald Reagan when Israel invaded Lebanon and was bombing civilians indiscriminately. Reagan got on the phone and demanded an immediate end to that onslaught, compared it to the Holocaust in the course of that phone conversation. And Israel to pull back, that's unimaginable today. So in a way, we've had a deterioration of the policy of the relationship between the US and Israel that's at this point unimaginable. Look, I don't think that Harris independently, that there's anything in her past that would make this particularly promising. What is potentially promising is the reading of where young progressive voters are, and the fact that there is a cost to continuing down the same path of just carte blanche for Israel to do whatever it wants, right or wrong, no questioning, unconditional military funding, unconditional diplomatic support. That is not sitting well with young progressive voters anymore. And it is only the realization that there is a political cost to continuing down the same track. Is there a hope that there could be the possibility of change with Kamala Harris? But to your point also, Mark, not a particularly significant one, right? We're not going to see a major shift in a Harris administration's policy compared to Biden. But even if it's a small one, small differences at the scale of violence that we're currently seeing could in fact make a huge difference. If the only thing Kamala Harris does different from Biden is apply a little bit more serious pressure to get us a ceasefire, that is the difference between thousands of Palestinians getting to live or die. So even a difference that small can actually have a really, really significant impact. So in a way, I agree with you. I don't think that there are signs of a major shift in policy with Harris, but I'm hoping a minor shift in policy that can actually have a big impact.
Rebecca, today, this week, when it was announced that Vice President Harris would not be present at this joint session, normally, obviously, she would be, she's President Pro Tem of the Senate. They said she won't be appearing, but she'll be having a private meeting with Netanyahu. People are projecting a green screen onto her, just like they did Obama. People are saying, "Oh, see, that means she's really down with the Palestinians. She's not even going to show up for Netanyahu." I'm like, nah, I don't think that's it. I think she don't want to be seen clapping for things or not clapping for things. I think it's about the kind of presentation that she would be accountable for if she shows up. And in that private meeting, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe about what she'll say. My point is, and my question to you is, how much are you seeing from your vantage point, people assuming, particularly Black voters and progressive voters, respectively, how many of them are projecting onto Kamala Harris sort of these grand expectations of her being a super political progressive?
a lot of younger people that I'm speaking to and people, millennials, we are all having this conversation about, okay, her stance being a part of the Biden administration is huge with like, she is in the Biden administration right now. She's a part of it. She's the vice president. And for her right now, we see whatever Biden says, that's kind of what she goes with. I see the empathy, and it sucks that the bar is that low that we have to say, okay, she's going to have some kind of difference in how she feels, and maybe more vocal about that when it comes to like speaking about a ceasefire. But there is still this tie and being an ally to Israel. But I like how you put that though, where you said it could make a difference with thousands of people still being alive, Palestinian lives. But a lot of people are looking at this is under a microscope for a lot of people. The moment that she says anything about Israel, Palestine, a ceasefire, no ceasefire, or however she words it, that is going to be what people remember. That is going to be just like how we just heard Biden speak about it. What we remembered in that moment was when he talked about the hostages and not about the people of Gaza, the Palestinian people and the people who've been murdered, the genocide that's happening there. But of course, it's the ties to Israel. Now, what I do believe is a lot of people do have their speculations on as to why she would be meeting Netanyahu just person to person. That's because she don't want to be seen, like you said, the presentation wise. I am running for president. I am on my first few days of this whole thing. I know that if I am in the room, I am going to have to probably like clap or whatever, as an ally to Israel leadership. But right now,
by the way, my producers are telling me that Vice President Harris also had a previously scheduled event speaking to the Zeta Phi Beta sorority.
She did. People were upset about that. Fox News was saying that she was speaking to a colored sorority. It was a whole thing. The word colored was trending because they had that conversation. So yeah, she decided to go speak to the Zetas. And so
dilemmas of a black candidate. Only a black candidate would have that dilemma.
Exactly.
But honestly, at a moment where she's trying to galvanize political and economic support from black women in particular as a grassroots political movement, it's probably more important to talk to Zetas, Deltas, AKAs, you know what I'm saying, or SG Rose than it is to be talking to Netanyahu in a joint session of Congress. She can get Netanyahu on the phone whenever she wants. But we're going to wrap in a second. I know y'all are very busy people. I'd like, starting with you, Reynard, to give me your kind of forecast of the next 3 months.
Oh,
yeah, I know. But we'll treat it like them sports prognosticators who all pretend that their Super Bowl predictions were right, even though they changed them 7 times. Between now and election day, a lot's going to happen. How do you see the campaign playing out? How do you see the race playing out? And who do you think ultimately is elected president of the United States?
Well, Trump will win the presidential, and it's not because I'm a Trump supporter or I'm Republican, though I'm both of those things. But when I look at the political landscape and I look at the dynamics and the issues, and I think strategically, and Rachel, you probably would disagree with me on this.
Rebecca.
Why do I keep calling her Rachel? I apologize, Rebecca. I don't know. I got Rachel stuck in my head. Heck.
All right.
That's because you're such a big Rachel Maddow fan.
Yeah, right. Well, listen, Rebecca, I'll pick you over that Rachel any day of the week. You're a lot more beautiful than that. Trust me.
Well, thank you.
But I think the Democrats, and even before Biden dropped out of the race, I think they're making a strategic mistake by focusing only on the issue of abortion when it comes to women in general, but black women in particular. I think that's an important issue, but I think black women have other concerns that are just as important than that one issue, but those other issues are not getting any exposure because the Democrats are hammering a one-horse pony, the issue of abortion, and thinking that's enough to get them over the hump. It's not. Trust me on that. When you go to the grocery store, I've seen women trying to pay for their groceries they couldn't afford a gallon of milk, so they had to get a quart of milk or a half gallon, hoping it lasts to the next time they get some money. And so,
I gotta ask you a question. All due respect, is that one of them? Is that real? Is that one of them Republican talking points? Like, when you really at a grocery store, watch somebody go to the checkout, try to pay for some milk, couldn't afford it, get their money rejected.
Well, no, Mark, you know what I do? God has been good to me, and I've never said this publicly, so you're breaking news here. I know in our community, especially, I live in the D.C. suburbs. I'm in Virginia, but once or twice a month, I'll go into the hood where, like, the beginning of the month or the middle of the month, where I know people's money are kind of running kind of tight. I will get behind a sister or a brother, and I'll just walk up. Would you mind if I pay for your basket of groceries?
Nice.
I don't know them from Adam.
Did you pay for that sister's milk who had to send the court back?
Yeah, I did. I did.
That's all I got. I was about to say, because if you didn't, that'd be real terrible.
Right. And again, my whole thing is, Mark, I've been without money in my life. I've been with money in my life. I enjoy being with it more than I do without. And so I want to try to bless in my little small way. I want to try to bless those who I'm more fortunate than in my own little small way. And again, I've never said this publicly and probably never will say it again, but I just get a thrill out of helping people. Not that I'm some big shot or anything, but I mean, Mark, I've been on the other side of that equation.
No, look,
I know what it's like.
Look, if you're in the dairy section making it rain, I respect it. I appreciate it. Do what you got to do, man. I think that we need personal generosity. We need individual philanthropy, but we also need structural, not just reform, but we need a complete overhaul of our system so that people don't need to bump into a really nice conservative radio host to pay for a gallon of milk, right? That they should have their needs met based on their access to food, clothing, and shelter by reimagining how this economy and this economic mode of production is produced. Omar, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to give Rebecca the last word. Omar, go ahead.
Prediction of how things are moving in the next few months. It's right now, I suspect that Trump does have the other hand. If I'm just going to close my eyes and bet who's going to be president, I fear that it will be Trump. That does not give me any pleasure. I think that's the worst case scenario, but I think it's the most likely one too. But you can see Trump fumbling between now and the election. He can't keep his mouth shut, and he's capable of saying insane things at any moment. So you never know how that happens. So if Trump screws up and Kamala Harris plays it perfectly, there's a chance that the things go a little bit differently. I will say, though, if you want to extend that a few more months, there is a nightmare scenario that is worth considering that includes foreign policy dynamics as well. There is a real threat of regional war in the Middle East right now, because even though nobody's able to stop what Israel's doing in Gaza, Israel's not able to stop what Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon and what Ansarullah or the Houthis are doing in Yemen. And there is this building tension that Israel is desperate to resolve through a major confrontation that would include taking on Iran as well. And Israel knows they can't do that alone. And Netanyahu has been relentlessly trying to get the U.S. embroiled in that war. The Biden administration has made it clear they're not going to. If you read quotes from Biden administration officials, they've always insisted on tamping down the prospect of a war between Israel and Lebanon. They're doing everything they can possibly do to diffuse the situation so it doesn't spread. And what I worry about is that Netanyahu, when you listen to his speech, just over the top praise for Trump about everything Trump has done for Israel at a time when Trump is not even president. I think he's trying to prime Trump, knowing that the polls are looking favorable for Trump at this point, to potentially get him to commit to this major regional confrontation, which would have absolutely devastating consequences. Israel is in a real pickle.
That might be an overcalculation by Netanyahu, because while Trump will do anything for power, he has no moral commitments or ethical investments. He don't like war. He don't like war.
I think that's true. Yeah, but there is a problem though. His son-in-law Jared Kushner is a family friend of Donald Trump's, and the last guy that Trump put in place as an ambassador to Israel is David Friedman, who by any measure is a religious fanatic who would welcome the possibility of a war. So what I worry about is that even though Trump himself would not be interested in a war, would rather avoid one, that the people surrounding him may push him in a direction where it feels like it's politically advantageous for him domestically or something to just go along and do that. Yeah, it certainly is not a safe bet, but it is a nightmare scenario whose possibility is a lot bigger than 0%. So it's something to worry and think about as well.
Man, y'all, neither you nor Reynard have given me hope or excitement. We have a lot to talk about, but I'm not inspired. Rebecca, I know we put all the burden and pressure on Black women to save us, but can you inspire me a little bit, or at least give me some reason to think that the next 3 months ain't gonna be a complete dumpster fire that results in an even bigger dumpster fire?
Okay, let me see if I can try, or I might be adding a little bit more gasoline to it. Who knows? Now, what I will say is my prediction is that we can possibly do it, right? This is something better than what I've seen when we were looking at the debate, when we were sitting here discussing the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I was like, oh, this is getting crazy. Joe Biden just doesn't like he can do another 4 years because that he isn't the expert on this, but he looks like he's about to, he needs to rest. And so now we've fixed that issue. We got Kamala Harris. I've heard this and I've said this myself. She's not the hero that we may have wanted, but this is what we needed at the moment. We was asking for something else and we got it. My thing is I want us to be real careful. I feel like we can get a win out of this. I know I may be just really far out right now by saying that, but I think that all of us, no matter where we stand on this, as far as when it comes to her, we need to really band together. All of that, kumbaya stuff, it's real cute on day one, but unfortunately she's a Black woman. We can't stay there. We got to hit the ground running every single day to convince people as to why she would be a great candidate and to push her because of a lot of the things that we've already know that she's discussed, a lot of things that aren't true that people believe about her and her record as when she was a prosecutor, those type of things. So I don't know. I think that we have a chance. Do I think it's going to be easy? Hell no. But I do think that we need to work and not be in la la land about it. So yeah, that's my take on that. Was that better? Was that good?
That was perfect, y'all. What a wonderful way to wrap this amazing, amazing conversation with y'all. Yo. We'll be following this for the next couple of months. We'll be covering every dimension, every twist and turn of the election cycle, of the election season, and of this historic shift in power in the Democratic Party. I want to thank my guest, Reynard Jackson. Thank you so much. Rebecca Azor, whose apparently secret online name is Rachel.
Stop, Mark, stop.
And Omar Bedad. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for hanging out with me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'll have you back on very, very soon. I can't wait. Everybody, thank you for watching Night School in this very special episode where we looked at President Joe Biden's address, but we also unpacked the future of the presidential race and maybe the political future of the Democratic Party. I want to thank you all for joining me, and I encourage everybody to hit that like button if you enjoyed the program tonight. Also hit the subscribe button. When you hit like and subscribe, you extend our reach and you expand our social media footprint, which sends the message to those algorithms that the most important thing is not corporate media funding. The most important thing isn't big capital. It's not billionaire donations. The most important thing that we can do is to support and fund grassroots media so that we can get grassroots political education, so that we can get grassroots social transformation. We do that through independent media. That's what holds up our democracy. And when you hit like and subscribe, you let the world know that this stuff matters to you. Also, if you're so inclined, make sure you hit the join button. If you don't see the join button on your phone or your device right now, you can even go to your desktop and find that join button and commit to being a monthly member of the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. By becoming a member, you commit to providing monthly financial stability and support to the channel for as low as $3.99 a month, just $3.99 a month. You can support our channel and you can support the work that we do every single month. Also, if you don't want to make a monthly commitment, you can make a single individual one-time payment through Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. The platforms are right there on your screen. If you enjoyed what you saw tonight, you might want to just make a donation to the Night School Classroom, what we call a little tuition. If you give $1, we are grateful. If you give $1 million, we are grateful. If you give anything in between, we are grateful. No amount is too big. No amount is too small. We just ask that you support us in any way that you comfortably can. And if you want to make a sacrifice for independent grassroots media, We'll take that too. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. I said we'll take any amount, but I want to be clear that if everybody watching right now, if every single person watching this live stream right now were to donate $10 through Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle, we would meet all of our financial goals for the month. We would meet all of our financial commitments to paying staff, to purchasing new technology, to editing and curating content, to all the things that we do every single day, Monday to Friday with night school at 9 o'clock, Monday to Friday, Sundays at 9 o'clock with office hours, where we do intellectual deep dives, Coffee and Books podcast at 9 a.m., and of course, the Classroom in the Cell podcast with political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal at 9 a.m. on Sundays. We do all of it to you, for you, free of charge. So we ask that if you can make a sacrifice, if you can make a donation so that we can stay alive and keep fighting the good fight, we ask that you do so. Again, a $10 donation right now would make everything work out for us if everybody watching were to make that commitment. But again, you do what you can. And if you can't donate any money, money's not the biggest thing. We ask you to like the content, share the content, and most importantly, study the content, because that is what night school is all about. See you tomorrow. Peace.